Top 10 evil serial killers who were never caught. Number 10. The West Mesa Bone Collector. $100,000 is still being offered for information on 11 women killed between 2001 and 2005. They were found buried in the West Mesa of Albuquerque, New Mexico, after weeks recovering the bodies over 92 acres of desert. The cause of death eluded the forensics teams, and 2 possible leads to the murders are dead. 1. Fred Reynolds was a pimp who had photographs of missing prostitutes, but he died of natural causes in 2009. The other, Lorenzo Montoya, had strangled a teenage girl in his trailer close to the burial sites, but was shot dead by the girl's boyfriend. As one investigator stated, serial killers move. If he didn't get caught, I'm sure there are more victims somewhere. Number 9. Cleveland Torso Murders. Between 1935 and 1938, 12 confirmed and 4 suspected victims of the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run were murdered and hacked to pieces. These victims of Cleveland's shantytown were always found beheaded. They were often dismembered as well, with the males sometimes castrated. The heads were not always recovered. One suspect was Dr. Francis Sweeney, a World War I doctor who had worked amputating limbs. But his cousin was a congressman, which made prosecution almost impossible. Although Sweeney ended his days in a psychiatric hospital, he did so mocking the lead investigator, sending threatening postcards to him and his family. The serial killer remains unidentified. Number 8. Texarkana Moonlight Murders. For months in 1946, the Phantom Killer held the town of Texarkana in panic after attacking 8 people, 5 of whom were killed, bringing home a haunting description of a 6-foot-tall man wearing a white sack as a mask over his head. Using a .32 caliber pistol, killing almost always 3 weeks apart, in the dead of night, the killer was never found. Even though they happened some 20 years apart, people have theorized that the killings were an early case of the Zodiac striking. Number 7. The Zodiac Killer. The Zodiac Killer claimed to have killed 37 people in his letters mocking the police. He was certainly responsible for 5 deaths in a number of attacks where he stabbed or shot people to death in California in the 1960s and 70s. He sent various clues as to his identity through phone calls and cryptograms, but only one of his 4 coded messages was ever cracked, claiming he was collecting slaves for the afterlife. He had been described as appearing in a black executioner's hood and a bib with a white circle and a cross on it. This was the symbol he painted at the murder scenes. This madman has eluded the police, leaving the case file open. His psyche can be glimpsed through his messages, one starting, "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It's more fun than killing wild game in the forest." Another simply said, "Peekaboo, peekaboo, you are doomed." Number 6. The Monster of Florence. Police have investigated more than 100,000 people in a desperate attempt to locate the Monster of Florence, who, from 1974 to 1985, murdered 7 couples. Always using the same gun, a .22 caliber Beretta, the monster would prey on couples making love in their cars. Leaving long pauses between killings, once for 7 years, the killer would often carry out ritual mutilation on the women, cutting their genitals from their bodies. While people have been arrested in connection to these crimes, it is still classed as a cold case, with the Florentine monster currently walking free and undiscovered. Number 5. Bola Kuj, the Vampire of Cincotta. When Kuj left his house near Budapest to fight in World War I, he claimed the barrels in his yard were a gasoline stockpile. After reports of his death, the barrels were opened, revealing 24 pickled corpses, many with puncture wounds in their necks. Kuj had started with his wife and her lover, the only male victim, before moving on to others. A secret room in his house revealed correspondence with 74 women and many books about strangulation. Kuj eluded the police a number of times, once even swapping a dead soldier into his hospital bed in Serbia before police could reach him. Sightings were reported as late as 1936 in New York, but he was never apprehended. Number 4. Adolfo Constanzo, the Witch Doctor. In the 70s, Costanzo was apprenticed to a voodoo sorcerer, where he sacrificed animals for his black magic. His audience of hitmen and drug dealers reveled in Constanzo's increasingly bloody displays of occultism. He could be seen slowly dismembering people who had to die screaming for his magic to be strong, or drinking liquids made of boiled human bone. After abducting and murdering an American student in 1989, Mexican police searched his ranch, finding 15 mutilated corpses and human brains in his cauldron. Costanzo was chased to Mexico City, firing at police officers from an apartment. Realizing he was surrounded, he gave his gun to one of his followers, ordering them to kill him, and thus escaping capture for over 25 murders. Number 3. The Alphabet Murders. Between 1971 and 1973, 3 girls were found dead in the Rochester area of New York. Their names were Carmen Colon, Wanda Wolkowitz, and Michelle Menzer. The alliteration of the names led to the murders being known as the double initial killings, or the Alphabet Murders. In 2011, Joseph Nasso, a 77-year-old man, was found guilty of killing 4 women, also with alliterative names. Unfortunately, the police's elation at finding their alphabet murderer was short-lived. DNA evidence acquitted Nasso of the earlier killings. While Nasso was sentenced to death for the 4 women, the alphabet murderer is still at large. Number 2. The Highway of Tears. Over a 450-mile-long stretch of Highway 16 in Canada, 19 women have officially been called victims of the Highway of Tears. Aboriginal communities state that the number is closer to 40 over the last 30 years. Some victims simply vanish, while others are found dead, dumped in the many ravines and creek beds beside the highway. It is unknown whether this is the work of one person or a group. However, there have been leads after an elderly man tried to kidnap a girl on the road, though he was never properly identified. It is known that at least 8 of the disappearances are linked to one person, but it is unlikely that they will ever be caught. Number 1. The Servant Girl Annihilator. Texas, 1884 to 1885. One of the earliest known cases of serial killings takes place 3 years before Jack the Ripper started his deadly trade. 7 women and 1 man were murdered, with a further 8 being brutally attacked, all while asleep in their beds. Some were killed indoors, others were dragged outside, and often an axe was used to brutally hack at their heads. A few of the victims were raped and mutilated, and curiously some of them were left with a sharp piece of metal stuck in their ear. Over 400 people were arrested, but none were convicted. The New York Times stated that the murders were committed by some cunning madman who was insane on the subject of killing women. A key suspect was shot dead by police while assaulting a girl, leaving the case of the Servant Girl Annihilator unsolved.
Hey guys, I'm Chris, and here is my list of the top 10 deadliest assassins. Now for the record, I'm talking about actual contract killers whose profession is killing discreetly. It's as much about the style and success of the killing as it is how many people they actually kill.